How much influence do you have on yourself? How much influence do you have on others? And how much influence do others have on you? That's the question here. And more importantly, do you choose to have influences on others? Do you choose on yourself? And do you choose to have others influence you? So today is the third day of the Influence Challenge, and we started to talk about why others have influence on us and we on others, and also we on ourselves. We also talked about, that was yesterday, about the how. How do others influence us? How do we influence ourselves? And today is about the choice we make. And I believe that whereas the why and the how was something that is done on a subconscious level, so most of the time we are not so much aware of the influence others have on us. Well, most of the time, and maybe even we are more aware probably more often than we think we are. And that's, of course, the whole idea behind on a subconscious level. Because if we are aware, then the question, of course, is how happy are we with it? And in that context, I also talked about the caged life, the comfortable life, and the charged life. And no, I didn't come up with those terms. That's Brendon Burchard. And well, basically it comes down to the caged life. Others determine what you are going to do or what you need to do. So they influence you in the negative sense, unless, of course, you're okay with it. But normally when you're caged, you want change. So it can be that someone said something to you when you were growing up, and at some point you just made it your own, or someone said it to you when you were already grown up, but they did it so often that at some point you started to believe that it was true. And then you just keep repeating it to yourself. Then there's the comfortable life, where people are like, well, we're living day, one day at a time. And in the future, at some point, we're going on holiday. And then, further down the line, then we are going to travel once we are retired. So that's the comfortable life, as in we're okay with the way it is and we're okay with what's about to come. And then there's the charged life, where people are like, no way that I'm going to wait till the end of time before I can do certain things. I'm going to do them now because I don't know how long I'll be alive and around. So let's make the most of it. So they don't want to just live the ordinary life. They want an extraordinary life, and they are willing to work for it. And well, let's take that to the choice to have others influence us, the choice to influence others and to influence ourselves. Now, both days I talked about 3 examples that I was invited to get into 3 examples on LinkedIn. And when the first one had to do with resilience in children, the second one had to do with getting people to cooperate in projects, and the third one is about clients in crisis. And well, yesterday I concluded that the how pretty much was the same for all of it. When it comes to being influenced, a lot of it has to do with trust. A lot of it has to do with safety. So also a little bit with supervision, communication, and I guess also trusting that there is some guidance one way or another to help you with certain things. Of course, guidance usually flies out the window at the moment that we become entrepreneurs. But even then, we still can have role models, which brings us to today's topic. So, when we talk about influencing ourselves, influencing others, having others influence us, we can talk about it from a negative point of view. We can talk about it from a neutral point of view. We can also talk about it from a positive point of view. Now, let's get the negative out of the way. So, negative is when you, negative would be when you are in a situation where I would say where you cannot get away from. Negative could also be about looking at life from a view of, okay, I need a backup plan. I need to adapt to life. I need to learn to set boundaries. Now, let me give you an example about the whole negativity and how others influence us in a negative way, because that's what this is about. So, I've got a couple of neighbors right behind me in this area. Well, usually I get around with my neighbors quite well. But there's one thing I cannot really stand really well, and that's when they start to play music at such a volume that I don't just hear the bass, but I hear basically everything. So the melody line, what's being played, you name it. And especially when that means that I cannot hear, if let's say that I'm watching television, that I cannot listen to the TV anymore or whatever it is. But basically, I cannot hear my own thoughts anymore. And well, one of the things that I noticed, so I think it started out with there being sort of like a mosque at the corner. Lots of people came. They looked at me and they were like, oh, you've got dark hair, you've got dark eyes, and you are not wearing anything. Oh, but you are wearing a t-shirt and you are wearing shorts. Well, it was from disapproval to anything like, we can lie here because you're not one of us, and everything in between. But the singing, oh my God, I so didn't like it. I don't like the style of singing, but it's just being there, penetrating through the walls. No, couldn't handle that. So they left. And then there were two kids who were, well, actually, it was one specific kid, the youngest one of the new owner. And he thought that it was nice to actually turn the stereo on. So Dad, with all his infinite wisdom, and especially with his kind heart, he's really a very gentle person and a hard worker, really hard worker. I have to say, when you talk about role models, he managed to build like 25 different company buildings. And that says something when you can branch out that way. But the young one was studying and he got a key so he could study in silence. And what did he start doing? He started to game with his friends. sometimes including Jack Daniels. I could see it in the window. And well, the result was they would turn on the music really loud and partying all the time till, well, sometimes 5, 6 in the morning. So didn't sit well with me, especially when I wanted to go live. So I said something about it, said more about it, and it was very hard to have decent conversation because it was straight away. I didn't like that. So I tried to talk to them through other parties, Big Brother, their father, and well, I have to say that nowadays it seems to work. And then at some point, someone else said to me, "Oh, have you heard that people are being DJs here?" And I was like, "Yeah, I think I heard something." I wasn't sure what it was, but it stopped before midnight, so I was okay with it. And then, bam, behind me, full-blown stereo house music. And again, well, I don't know if I actually said it today. I don't mind house music, but when you cannot get around it, that's all different ballgame. Now, this started Thursday night. That's when I got to meet TMS1. And actually, I was curious about the type of music he was playing, and I was still under the assumption that they would stop before midnight. And then the next day, the other two were there, and they started testing the system all the way up, then low volume, high volume. So nothing I could depend on. And then they said, "Well, we want to have parties. Do you have a problem with parties?" I said, "Well, if you let me know so I can anticipate, then no. And by the way, I do work at night and I'm going to work the whole weekend." Makes sense, right? So then yesterday, there was the music and I heard laughter. People were happy. And, when people have a party, I'm like, okay, people have a party. Let them have some fun. But I did expect them to, at some point, stop partying. So by the time that it was almost time for me to go live, I was like, okay, this is well after midnight. I'm going to go down there and ask them if they can turn down the volume, since I don't want any music audible on the video. So that's what I did. Now, what I didn't consider, but it happened today, full blown, was I came back here. I called back at base from a friend. And I was already like, okay, Hugh is out there at the back of the building. So the ones in the corner, no. The other ones, no. Okay, good. So then I opened up the door. No, still no sound. Okay, that's good. But the mere fact that I was listening for it, anticipating that there might be a lot of music going on, a lot of noise, that's of course not good. It's like, hey, it already takes me on a level of, I don't know if I would call it anxiety, but something close to it. Like, I'm not at ease with what's going on. I need to be prepared in case. And I was like, ooh, that's been a long while ago. And back in the days when I worked as a trainer, and also other times when there was too much work for me to be done on my own, or they expected too much of me, then someone would refer to it as a pressure cooker system. And, well, I knew that 0, 1, 2, 3 was still okay, but from 3 onwards, I would fly off the handle. And today I realized I'm not at a level 0. I'm not at a level 1. I'm not at the level 2. I'm probably at the level 3. And it doesn't go down until I'm here and I'm aware they're not here. So when I can anticipate it, it's a little different. But because it was 3 days in a row and it literally brought back everything that had happened before, I was absolutely wired. Let's put it that way. Now, okay, so when it comes to choosing the influence others have on us, we like it that people, of course, have positive influence on us. Then we're talking about role models. And I'll get back into that a little bit later. But, when we talk about role models, there's safety involved. It could be neutral, what we experience, but usually it's either positive, something we choose. We want to be enveloped by positive influences. There's probably some form of neutral, maybe something that we just want to know. It doesn't have any direct emotional impact on us. And then there is the part where you say, hey, I want to do this, but it's not easy. So the negative influence I just described isn't because I chose it. This is about how others influence us and why we get influenced. So one of the reasons why I get influenced is because I'm very sensitive to sound, and others can block it and I cannot. So I'm always surprised that other people are like, yeah, okay, it's the way it is. I literally don't understand it. But of course, it also has to do with copyrights. So I don't want it to be audible. But the main thing is, what I like about being here is I can have peace of mind here. I can calm down. I can think about things, and all of a sudden that's gone. Now, we've heard how other people can influence us and why it's possible that they can influence us. So the why is not just my brain and me being very sensitive. It also has to do with the amount of sound they make in the walls. And actually, these are concrete buildings. So I'm always surprised how much sound there is, because if there's somewhere I do not expect it, it would be here. Well, we know by now, at least I know by now, that sound carries, absolutely carries. Now, getting back to the whole choosing. When we choose to be influenced by others, or we choose to influence others ourselves, those two are actually very different things. The impact is very differently. So first of all, the mere fact that I'm talking about choice has to do with responsibility. It has to do with you want something to happen. So whereas when we talked about why we get influenced and how, in those cases we can talk about circumstances. When I talked about the negativity just now, those are circumstances too. And normally I would say, I would go elsewhere, but there are no other options to go elsewhere. So this is where I do my thing. This is where the internet is the best. And when I do stuff at the middle of the night, I don't want to wake other people. So it makes sense to be here. Now, talking about having an influence on, no, let's start with the easy thing first. That's the influence we choose that others have on us. When I talk about Brendon Burchard, he's one of my role models. So he knows a lot about personal development. He knows a lot about marketing. And I've been following him for years. He's goofy, he's funny. And whenever he's there, the energy just vibes. He knows how to prepare himself, and he uses frameworks, and he also teaches us how to do certain things, and that can be done related to marketing. It can also be done related to coaching, or everything related to personal development for that matter. So I've been following him for a number of years, I think probably over a decade. So has the guy influenced me? Yes. But how much has he influenced me over the years? Well, I would say that the last year he has influenced me more than ever before. So that may sound a little bit weird, because normally when you first get in touch with someone or a certain topic, then the influence is the most. But no, at this moment I've chosen to actually be surrounded by all these things. The coaching that his coach is giving me, the trainings which are on the 1st and sometimes the 2nd of the month, on the 15th of the month, and then something somewhere in between every Wednesday, the 1st and the 3rd Wednesday of the month. I mean, just consider it all together. It's a lot. So I've decided to immerse myself into it. And I can say that I can notice the difference. I can notice the change in myself. So choosing to have someone influence me is, in this case, a very nice sensation. Well, sensation is probably not the word I want to use, but why do I use sensation? Because there is safety involved. There's someone who's explaining things to you. It's nice when there's a role model out there. It's like, hey, I can rely on someone, and there's someone I can ask questions. So it's all in all together. It might be challenging, but it's challenging in a good way, because you want growth. Now, we can immediately link that also to the hard part of, I'm not sure if I would call it negative, but I would most certainly not call it easy. So the other side of everything, especially when we talk about Brendon being a role model, is he challenges us. He challenges us to grow, and we pay a lot of money to be challenged. But that also means that there's work involved. And when we are unknown with certain things and we experience a certain kind of fear, well, be ready for it, because he challenges you to go to the next level. And well, if you're not ready to go to the next level, then you probably wouldn't immerse yourself the way that I did. Does it make it easy? No, it doesn't. Just like I said, he's one of those people who likes to prep himself. It also means that we need to learn to prep ourselves to go out there and do certain things. And sometimes that's easier, and sometimes that's a little bit harder. When I started this live and I talked about negative influences, well, that's one of those things that is not easy, and it drains my energy big time. So that's not the best thing that I would people to experience out there. Fatigue, same thing. And that's one of the reasons why I decided to lie down for an hour before I actually went live, because I was so immensely tired. But I set the alarm, and here I am, and I'm good to go. And before that, I wrote some things down. I needed to sort of get back in the game again. That was the downside of sleeping a little bit, but here I am again. So I had to follow, what was my line of thoughts again? And that's the thing, I don't like to edit. So I keep things the way they are. If I do edit, there is some reason for it that I believe that it's better to do it, but normally I don't edit things out. So it's what you see is what you get. Now, like I said, when we choose to do certain things, that is hard work. And it's about adaptation, being the result of challenging yourself, of being challenged. It's about learning, hey, what do I need to do in order to be able to do this? So when I talked about the neighbors, I had to go there and tell them, please turn down the bass, because otherwise I cannot do my job. I cannot go live because the sound is so intrusive that it would be audible on video. And that's apart from me not being able to think about things. So there's a lot involved when you decide to take responsibility and say, okay, so you are my role model, you give me assignments, let's go do it. I would almost say that when you go to school, especially when you are going in a certain direction, you go to college or university, well, that's when you've chosen a certain direction. And then that, of course, means learning new stuff, meeting new people, which often is very exciting, but it's also hard work. So there you go. Now, when we talk about influence, I just talked about being influenced by other people. But usually that leads to somewhere. It leads to from having a role model to not only having a role model, but actually becoming a role model and being a role model. Especially when you are an entrepreneur, but also when you're working at certain companies, they might give you the opportunity to actually become a role model by becoming a manager or someone who supports the entire team. And then, of course, it's nice if you know what you need to do. So when I became a trainer, I got all these self-development courses and also courses related to training. So I had to stand in front of the camera, see what happened. And, well, the one thing that they said was get that energy to go up. So I guess that's the thing I learned and I'm still using today. That skill, get the energy to go up. As Brendan says, summon the energy. And so being trained to become the person who trains other people, influences other people. I nowadays am a coach, apart from being a therapist and counselor, well, fitness trainer, all those kind of things, you name it. And either I've done it or I'm still doing it. And, well, it's a role where others come to me for advice. And that means that I need to be the example. If I don't do it, then who am I to go to? So it's talk the talk, walk the walk. It's about showing people how things can be done. I'm not going to say should be done, because people still have a choice to do certain things, to do things the way they want to. But it's about them seeing other possibilities, seeing other outcomes, seeing a better shot at life a better option when it comes to work, a better way of communicating. So there are a lot of things which can be different. And well, there are a number of people looking at me for how I do it. Now, some of it really need to change, and they've chosen to actually change it. So they choose to listen to me. They choose to talk to me about, hey, how can things be done? And from those people, a number of them actually work on it vividly, like every day or almost every day. And then there are the people who listen to me and they think like, yeah, you've got a point. But it's not until they are exposed to me like every day, until they're like, oh, okay, let's go do certain things or let's not. And they actually realize what it's like to have me walking around and be a constant influence and presence around them for a while. And the question, of course, is what are they going to do with it? So some people learn while they're around me, and the moment they are no longer around me, question is, do they still want to do the same things they said they were going to do? Or do the other circumstances take hold of them? Which is one of the reasons why I want to take people on a trip. I want to take them outside their normal environment so I can actually work with them and have them experience other thoughts and other ways of doing stuff. And being in the same environment every day with the normal routines and the normal day-to-day triggers isn't as effective as taking people out of it and be somewhere where they can focus on themselves and on what's being taught and on questions and everything. So the whole choosing part comes with a lot of hard work. Sometimes that's easy, and sometimes that's not so easy. And that's why I say sometimes it's literally hard work, especially once you become a role model for others, it's hard work. Now, of course, there are also the people who are at the same level as we are, and or people who understand where we are going, and they influence us by asking us questions. Well, where do you want to go? What do you need? And they make us like really happy. They make us energized, and they also keep us accountable, and vice versa. We do the same, because we're basically at the same level. So that's nice. I like to have accountability partners surrounded by people who think in the same way. I probably could have some more people that think that way, but you never know when that's going to happen. It's on my list of more people who want to get the same outcome I do. Well, my outcome is I want to leave a legacy where people not only learn, but also know how to speak up and speak out and share their story and are being seen, heard, and valued and respected by others. And of course, do the same on their end so other people feel heard, seen, and respected too. And I have to say, when I was talking to the neighbors, as in a couple of days ago, when I was talking to the other two, that was nice because I felt heard. So that was good. So I do believe that the next day, the first one who was there like a couple of days earlier was actually there, but he got it. And, when people listen to you, it sort of takes the edge off. So that's good. I also talked about the 3 examples. So let's go to the example of children and making them resilient. I talked a lot about how they can be influenced. I did so yesterday. And we as adults, but also friends and the other children in class can really influence a child. Of course, family too, friends, circumstances, surroundings, everything has a certain influence, especially when growing up. But like in the example I just gave you, it can actually still be that you get influenced like on the spot, no matter how old you are or how young you are. The choice when it comes to choosing influence, that's a whole different ball game. Now, children are depending on other people, especially when they are younger, and sometimes due to circumstances, they have to grow up fast, and they have to become a parent at an age that they don't want to be a parent. So, for instance, in World War II, my grandfather died when my father was 17 years old. He was the oldest one, and he had to take care of the family. When we talk about children growing up quickly, it could also be because of other circumstances. You have to get water every day, otherwise, we have no clean water to drink. And you cannot go to school, you have to work because otherwise there's no food. Now, those are not things that they choose to do. It's more like, let's pick up this role. So that's a subconscious decision, and often actually children are told this is what you need to do. So choice is not really involved. When children become teenagers, that of course changes. They are more aware of themselves. You cannot hold them down. You cannot say, I'm going to lock you in your room, which of course is not the nicest thing to do. But what I want to say is the influence from parents and also from teachers starts to diminish, with the exception of them being a role model. And especially when they're a good role model, of course, they have huge impact on others. Also, by listening and talking to especially teens, that makes a huge difference. So what children need is that they are seen, they are heard, and they are not considered stupid or anything, but actually every question is a good question. And that people understand when they come with a question, it's not because they're too lazy to do it themselves, it's because they don't know how to figure it out. Okay. So, like I said, at some point, teenagers, they can start earning money, they are going to see friends, they can decide where they want to sleep, well, depending on the parents, of course. But there's a lot more autonomy involved. And, well, depending on what the circumstances are and in what kind of age we live, people will choose to be self-supporting and live on their own sooner rather than later. So nowadays, it's not abnormal that people in their late 20s actually still live at home. That wasn't possible when I was growing up. Early 20s, you left the house. That was a given. So now we get back to the whole choosing of things. So when you go to college or you go to university, that's a choice. A choice. Where do you want to go? What do you want to become? There's a little downside to this. Children, teenagers, often already have to choose where they want to, in which direction they want to be heading, when they have no clue what they want to become. So as early as 11 or 12 years old, they might have to choose a certain direction which excludes certain possibilities. I don't believe that's the right way to do it, but that's the way certain things work nowadays. Now, fortunately, I do know as an adult, you can always choose to learn something and change your specialty. So that's what I did. No clue that I was going to be someone who was doing something in personal development or a fitness trainer or a sports masseuse or whatever. No clue that I would be working in IT, because I always said I'm not going to do it. I was going to the Academy of Arts. That's what I did know. And even that was not my own choice. Being creative was, drawing was, writing was. But it was my mom who said, go to the Academy of Arts. No, I'm happy she did. So, resilience in children, choosing influence. I do believe that when you give them the option to choose from an early age on, whether it's what they can wear, are you going for outset A or outset B, realizing what the consequences are of certain choices they can make already makes a lot of difference. So when you give them some room, some options to choose, that's going to have an impact on them. They don't know that you are teaching them something, but they are more aware that choices have consequences. So that's good. Now let's go to the part where we are talking about employees and we are talking about projects. So one of the things that I talked about is that depending on the experience that people have had, they are eager to do something or they're not. Usually when you're still young and you haven't worked that long, everything is exciting, everything is new, there's a lot of curiosity. And then depending on what you have experienced, that dies down, especially when we're talking about a lot of reorganizations, about never being challenged, never learning something new. You know, those things, they have its impact on you. And sometimes the lack of impact has its impact on someone. So when we're talking about them working together in a project, it's the question, what is the impact of it? So do they know the other people? Do they want to know the other people? Do they know what's happening with all the work that they are doing? Are certain agreements still listened to? So say, for instance, that you say, on Wednesdays, 3:00, I'm done, or at noon, I'm done. I'm not going to work after that because I've got other obligations. Will the other party involved who's in charge of the project say, yeah, that's okay, I know about it? Or will that person tell you, no, you need to stay? And then, of course, the next question is, how much influence do you give the other one? Or are you going to say, I stick to my boundaries, I'm going to leave, and whatever consequences there are there, well, that's the way it is. We agreed on me not having to work after 12:00 because I have got other obligations. So even if you want to, I've got other obligations. And then there are always people who say, ooh, I fear for my job. And well, I'd rather bend backwards to accommodate that person who says you need to stay, and then tell the other people who are depending on me I can do it, as opposed to sticking to what we agreed upon. So it's important that other people honor the same agreements that you agreed upon when you started to do a certain job somewhere. And of course, those agreements can change. And when they do, it's still important that the people who work with you after still honor those agreements, because there's a reason you wanted those things to happen. Now, choosing to be part of a project is again a choice. And the choice to how much you are willing to participate is also a choice that's on you. So, do we have others inspire us when we are part of a project or when we are at a certain department doing our things? Or are we actively engaged? When we are actively engaged, we usually have an effect on other people. And just to give you an example, when I go live on Zoom or I'm part of a training which is live on Zoom, then at some point there are breakout rooms. So let's say I'm getting training with, I don't know, sometimes it's with a couple of dozen people, sometimes it's with hundreds of other people. The moment that we are in those breakout rooms, so like small little meetings, we have a certain amount of time. And say there are 5 people and we each have 5 minutes. The question is there someone who says, okay, keep track of the time? So if I would be live at an event from Brendan, then I'm used to a buzzer. So when the buzzer is there, and actually you can already see it on the screen, the time is counting down. Now, when I'm doing things online, there's probably a timer hidden somewhere. Well, there is. But the question is, how visible is it? Or do I need to click continuously to see it? So one of the things that I've learned is I use my phone. I set the timer on the phone and then it starts counting down. Now, the good news is I'm not the only one to do so, but it does happen that sometimes I am the only one who does. So by what I do or don't do, which includes looking around and seeing if people haven't said anything and then saying, okay, what's your line of thoughts, but also making sure that people don't take too much time, which includes also myself, that I don't take up too much time from the others because we only have so much time each. That's an influence we have on others, on ourselves, and it comes with responsibility. But I do know that when we see other people do it, we get encouraged to do the same thing. And of course, there are also the people who are like a little less involved. They're there, but you know, their mind might be elsewhere, or they're still a little shy because it's new. And then it's a different ballgame. But in a project, it all depends on the energy. And you will see different roles in teams, and depending on the experiences, so how we have been influenced, and the trust that we have, and also the impact that this project has on our future dealings, whether it's jobs or whatever it is, maybe also getting to know other people, creating a network, maybe being noticed by a CEO. So depending on what the outcome is, you are probably more likely to be like, hey, let's go do it, or a little less likely, let's go do it. When you are forced to become part of a project and you don't want to be a part of it, well, you know what I'm going to say, probably. And again, then it becomes a choice. How much do you want to participate in things? Now let's go to the next example, which is about clients being in crisis. So the question is, what can you do when your client is experiencing a crisis? And I talked about the influence, why people can get into a crisis, how can they be influenced? So by certain sounds, smells, all those things, how you can influence them to be at ease again, to calm down. I talked about triggers. I talked about, again, about sensory input. But of course, it also has to do with expectations and trust. And the example where I started out with about the neighbors and the noise is such an example. It could easily trigger me to go haywire. I don't think I've ever done so, but I can tell that when it comes to the pressure cooker, it's there. It's absolutely there. And it disappeared the moment that, I realized all is good. But I don't know what's going to happen when I realize that things are not good and I have to go ask again. And I don't like asking people to change things for me. But, that's about setting boundaries and being a role model and talking about speaking up and speaking out. I, of course, cannot sit back and do nothing. I mean, I know what happens when people feel like they are cornered and they cannot go anywhere. So we want to prevent that part. We want to make sure that people do not feel cornered. So when it talks about people being in crisis, we can choose to influence other people so they can get back at ease again. So we do certain things actively. We can also choose to calm ourselves down, to get our ratio to kick in and know what to do. Of course, we can also choose to be sulking and not do anything until it builds up. And that's also linked to how we talk to ourselves and what we believe ourselves to be true. So basically how we influence ourselves. So if we believe that there's no use taking any action, we're not going to do it. And things get from bad to worse. But if we say there's always an outcome, I don't know how, but I am going to find a way out. Like, for instance, the young ones, 2 doors down, I don't expect a lot of noise from them anymore. Sometimes I can hear them, but it's only occasionally. And that's why it's so sad that actually they now have influenced the other ones to actually make a lot of noise. But when people are in crisis, it's about knowing the tools. It's about recognizing the triggers, being ahead of it, and knowing the tools to get away from the triggers and the emotions involved and the feelings and the emotional reactions that come with it. So going for a walk, stepping literally out of the situation, making sure that you are no longer exposed, whether it's actually being somewhere or whether it's in your mind, that's something that's key. And depending on how quickly you realize you are in a situation where you're being triggered, the easier it gets to actually get back to normal again. Whereas when you're in full-blown crisis and you only want to stop the pain, I'm not talking about physical pain, I'm talking about mental pain, the chaos, and you'll do everything just to get rid of it. Abuse, hurting yourself, cutting yourself, all those kind of things. That's when, when can we interrupt that pattern? Now, there's such a thing as AA. That's there for a reason. And the best thing about it, you're not alone. There's support. You actually have a sponsor. So the sponsor influences you. You influence yourself because you reach out to the sponsor, you go to the meetings, you influence others by showing what's possible, and others influence you by saying, okay, here we are here for you. So when we talk about choices, changing habits and showing others the results is one of the most impactful things. When I started doing my daily Instagram posts, which I started doing December 1st last year, I didn't have a clue that I would still be doing it like right now. And we are now at the end of April. But I did it, and it shows people that it can be done. So I know I do influence people the way I do. Another way is, especially for the local ones, at first I pick up the phone with them and I start talking to other people, explaining what's going on. And at some point I might actually have my own call. Sometimes we cannot avoid that, say that the hospital calls to make an appointment. Then, well, you have to accept that call. You cannot say, well, I've got a client here. I'm sorry, I cannot talk, because then you won't get the appointment anymore. So there are exceptions there. But also, because they see you interact with other people, not only on the phone, but also when you get out there, they see how you react. And by observing you, you become a role model. So as for people in crisis, they can choose to get out of it if they are not entirely full-blown in crisis. The sooner they recognize the triggers, the sooner they can choose to change it, to reach out to other people, to go out for that walk, to listen to certain music, whatever it is to calm themselves down. Go to the gym might be one of those too. So there's still a certain amount of choice involved. And of course, like I said, it's also related to how much do you believe that you can actually influence yourself, or have others influence you in such a way, saying things again and again and again, that you actually believe it's you and it has no use to change it anyway. So that's when people go downhill, usually quickly. And there needs to be some sort of intervention in order to have that changed. And even with an intervention, if they don't want to do it because they don't believe it, nothing is going to happen. So this brings us back to what people do want to be an influence on other people's lives. Now, first of all, when you're a parent, you influence other people's lives. End of story. It starts when you become a partner. You influence the other person. And, there are marriages that work out, or living arrangements that work out really well. And there are some of them which work out really badly. So it's at the expense of the self-esteem of one of the people. Sometimes both partners might start drinking. One might be abusive. One might have been outgoing and then starts to turn inwards more and more. From having fun together and listening to one another, there's no longer any respect involved. It can go in all different directions. And sometimes during that situation, children come into play. And that's not because they chose to have children. Well, sometimes they do, because then things will get better, right? Wrong, because that adds even more pressure to it. And sometimes just happens. People get pregnant. Does happen. And of course, the question is, what do you do? And if you decide to keep the baby, be the parent, then how willing are you to be a role model in a positive sense? If you don't know how it works because you had dominant parents or you were being abused as a child, then chances are that you still don't know how to act when you are an adult. When you've seen one of your parents drinking or maybe your grandparents drinking, chances are you don't want to expose your child to it or don't want to be exposed to it yourself. So you actually break the cycle. The not so good news is that the next generation might pick up on it again. So it's about keeping an eye on what's going on. When you've never learned to choose and to set boundaries, it's hard to pass on that it's important to set boundaries. So I do remember that my mom always said, make sure that you can earn your own money, don't be dependent on your guy. And that was because in the age that she was born, in that time, or the part of the age that she was born, it was still the time that once you got married, you stopped working and you had to make sure that your husband was taken care of in all his needs. He could demand everything he wanted because he was the one who was responsible for bringing home the money. Of course, things changed, and nowadays both partners usually work unless something else is going on. But getting back to influences, it starts as early as in, hey, who do we want to be? Do we even think about who we want to be as a parent or as a grandparent? I've seen some amazing examples out there, especially of grandparents, but also of parents, that I'm like, wow, look at those kids. I have a lot of respect for the stay-at-home moms. There were probably also stay-at-home dads, so when you're a stay-at-home dad, then kudos, especially if you can be the one who teaches your children how to be patient, how to choose certain things, how to study, and make them ready for everyday life. That's a job by itself. I believe that being a stay-at-home parent is a full-time job. Now, going onwards, when others are coming over, so when you have children or you have friends, we also have an impact on others. We also influence others. So what's your normal baseline? Are you positive? Are you negative? Are you like, things are never going to happen anyway? Oh, yeah, that's me. I always have bad luck. Or are you the one who says, well, something may have happened, but I'm going to change that no matter how. I'm going to work on it to make it happen. The good news is that you might have a pessimistic outlook on life, but you can change that because we can create neural pathways, new ones. So when we talk about mindsets, we might have certain mindsets on a subconscious level, and we might not even be aware of them. But we can tell ourselves, I don't agree with it. So when you feel it coming up, you can actually put something which blocks that thought and say, no, I'm not going to give in to whatever it is. I'm choosing to do something else. And merely by doing that and talking about it to others, you also influence others. You are basically being the role model for others, but also a role model for yourself. So that's something to think about. We can do way more than we think. Now, last but not least, we train our brain, ourselves. So by not doing anything, by not taking action, the brain knows there's nothing to expect from you. By saying you're going to do something and not doing it, the brain knows not to expect anything. But when you actually work on it, tweaking, changing, seeing what actually works for you, the brain also knows, hey, I can trust this person to actually work on things, and things might not be easy, but there will be a solution. Now, here's a little cool thing. The brain doesn't really know the difference between what's actually going on and what we visualize. So we can train the brain to react in a certain manner if we anticipate it before it's actually happening. Now, if you think along those lines, we can also be our own future role model. So we know who we want to be, we know what we want to do. And when we ask ourselves, what would you do? Don't be surprised if there's actually an answer which you don't like, but you know to be the smart one there. Because the answers are there. It's just that we are not used to it. We don't have the courage yet to do it. And saying it for the first time out loud, oh my God, that means that once you've said it, you can't take it back. So then you have to do it. And to give one simple example, at some point, my coach asked me, what are you going to do? And I said, I'm going to expand my knowledge by reading one book a week. And the moment I said it, it was like, oh my God, what did I say? But I had said it. And the good news is, I'm not sure if it's the good news. Well, what happened was I couldn't do it. And so the good news is I still do it. I just don't do one book a week. But I do read every day, and my coach already knew that I was going to say so. So that was kind of nice. So it caused me to relax. But it's about adapting. It's about changing. And all of these are choices. What are you going to do? So now that you've watched this, my question is, what are you going to do? Are you going to work on this every day? Are you going to listen to the audio recordings? Are you going to do the homework that's included? Are you going to do assignments? Are you going to challenge yourself? How do you want to be a role model for others? How do you want to be a role model for yourself? And are there role models out there you are like, yeah, I would like to be, or at least do certain things the way my role model does? Well, if you do, then you know what you need to do. So I assume that you already have registered by clicking ladylexi.com/influence challenge. Please note that both the I and the C from influence and challenge are capitals. I didn't expect the system to not accept lower cases anymore, but unfortunately it doesn't. So if you have registered, then go take the next step and make sure that you have access to it on a daily basis. And next, do something with it. Listen to it in the car, talk about it with your friends, talk to a coach about it, be coached by me, but make a choice. Because this is all about how you influence yourself, how you impact yourself. It's about courage, it's about confidence, it's about choices. So now let's go do it.